Om Tatsaviturvaram Rupam Jyoti Parasya Dhimahi Yanna Satyena Ipaye. Let us meditate on the most auspicious form of Savitri, on the light of the Supreme. We shall illumine us with the truth. So we'll start with part 2, the opening book, the book of birth and quest, Savitri's arrival on the earthly scene, how it happened, what compelled her mortal birth is what is described in the earlier pages here. 93.1. Pardon me?
93.1.
Yeah.
93.
The birth and childhood of the brain.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Next. Did well. Now, before we come to the birth of Savitri, let us say what happened just little before this canto to build up the sequence of how the narrative is developing in the epic here. Essentially, very briefly, Ashapati has a rendezvous with the Divine Mother. He is standing at the top of this creation and she is coming from the transcendental down below. So the meeting is not exactly in the transcendent. Ashapati is still in the lower hemisphere, but he is looking up and she is coming down. And of course, he prays to her that the prayer is very significant, that she should come down here and solve the problem of this mortal creation. Unless she takes mortal birth, this cannot be solved. Well, that is the immediate way of putting things, but it also means that it is only through her that the new creation can be established here on the earth. The evolution can go forward only after her taking the mortal birth here. And she condescends with initial hesitation. She was not very spontaneously, immediately responding, but she does finally concede his prayer and she comes down here. Now, what happens there is something very interesting. See, as I said, she is coming from here, he is climbing up here, and on the threshold mind, the meeting is taking place. On the threshold mind, at the top of mind, bordering on the supermind. Yes. It is there, because it is from here the prayer has to rise. It is from there the answer has to come. The call and the answer, the response has to come. Now, just a couple of things I will say here. After granting the boon to Ashapati, she goes back to her transcendental world and he comes down here. Now, the way in which the description is here is in the earlier section, 92.1. as a flame disappears in endless light. Just two sentences. Ninety-two point
92
One.
point.
92. This is 92.1. This is 9.
Point 1, okay.
Section
Yeah.
4.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. We'll have to press due to speed here. Yeah. As a flame disappears in endless light, immortally extinguished in its source, vanished the splendor and was stilled the world. Now what it means is that she is standing there and she is withdrawing to her abode. Splendor is personifying the Divine Mother herself here. Now he says, as a flame disappears in light. See what happens? There is a flame here. Now when the light becomes brighter and brighter, brighter and brighter, brighter and brighter, the flame disappears. It means it does not become visible. Not that it has gone away, it is there, but it is not visible. It is in that sense she is receding into the brightness and brightness and brightness. What a beautiful simile you see of description of how she disappears, you see. As a flame disappears in endless light, immortally extinguished, because it's not there. She's there, immortally, always there, immortally extinguished in its source, from the absolute, from where she had come. She has gone into that thing, you see. Vanished the splendor and was stilled the word. The word was stilled means she had given the boon to him and everything has now become silent. So she has gone back. Now what happens to Ashwapati? Little later on, down below, 92.8, last sentence. Across the light of fast receding plains that fled from him as from a falling star. See, he is coming now as a falling star. It's a free fall practically for him. He is
Back
coming.
down.
Pardon?
Back down.
Back down to the earth, back to the earth. He's coming down like a falling star. He's coming. And what happens when the falling star comes? The planes start receding,
Yes, of course.
as if the planes now from which is coming, they start receding back. It is a relativity in the vertical dimension. You are traveling in the train or in the car, and you see that the trees and all the mountainscapes, etc., they are moving behind you. Here, he is coming here. It's not he is coming. It is as if the planes are receding back to see there to see. Across the light of fast receding plane that fled from him as from a falling star, compelled to fill his human house in time. This is the important thing. He has come back now to the human house. He has been sort of compelled. He has to come here and do the thing which she has asked him to do. She has asked him, all right, I will come and take a mortal birth. All right. She has to come back to the human scene. His soul drew back into the speed and noise of the vast business of created things. So he is back into the bus, into the activity, human activity here like that. And it is in that process then the Savitri is conceived, because he has come back to the earth, you see. That's the important point. And he has taken the one position now. He is no more that yogi standing there. He has to fulfill what he has asked for to do, you see. Or the vast business of created thing, a chariot of marvels of the heavens, broad-based to bear the gods on fiery wheels. How is it coming? Like a chariot. Who are the riders in the chariot? The gods themselves. They are coming now. Broad-based to bear the gods on fiery wheel, flaming, he swept through the spiritual gates. He is coming down to the spiritual gates below here. And then, later on, to the end, he says, the Lord of life resumed his mighty rounds, the scanned field of the ambiguous globe, this uncertain thing, this vague world, uncertain world. He has resumed his work in this mortality, in this vagueness here. Now he says here, the Lord of life. Lord of life is the literal translation of the word Ashwapati.
Lord of life is Ashwa.
Lord of life, Ashwapati. Ashwa means life force, horse. Ashwa means horse, and horse stands for life force.
Yeah.
And Pati means the Lord. So here he is now the real Ashwapati. He is the Lord of life. Everything is now fully under his control. And with that realization, with that siddhi, with that mastery, whatever you want to call it, he is now resuming the work in his creation. So that is the beginning, that is the background of how things now are going to happen here in the next canto. The next canto begins with the description of the seasons.
Yeah.
The description of the seasons. According to the Indian pattern or the moment of the year, we have 6 seasons. And we have here now the description of the 6 seasons immediately at the beginning of this canto, of this book also. Now the important point is this: why does the poet begin with the description of the seasons? Which is kind of natural, you see. I mean, is it simply luxuriating in poetry? Is there some purpose? Is there some meaning, some idea behind the description of the season? Or is he just taking this thing as an occasion to let himself go as a poet? Which cannot be so, of course. It cannot be so, of course. The one way, in fact, there are a number of aspects connected with this. One of the aspects is she is coming upon earth. Savitri is going to take human birth. Now, until now, Ashwapati was face to face with the Divine Mother, the Transcendental Mother, who lives in eternity. Now that eternity has to manifest herself in time. So the first step is from the eternal into the temporal. That is the first thing. Therefore, immediately the transition is described by what is that eternal, what is that temporal period. And the pattern of seasons immediately follows here. How do you describe time? Now, when you talk of time, it is what you would call the cyclic time, periodic time. And in number of places, Shivandu speaks of the necessity of the periodic time in his prose writings. For instance, in the synthesis of yoga, he speaks of the 4 aids for doing yoga. Shastra, then Shastra means scripture or guidance or whatever you call it. Then your urge to do things, utsaha. And then the third one is Guru, the teacher, and then time. He speaks of time. Time and its periods, and its cycles. It doesn't say linear time, which goes in cycles. So that is one of the aids also. In other words, the role of time here is also connected with the development of our yogic consciousness. And it is from that angle you have to see why he is describing this cyclic time, basically, you see, periodic time. That is one way of looking at it. She from the eternal is stepping into time, which is cyclic because it has to move forward through various stages like that. Now, in the Indian tradition, we have what are called yugas. Yuga means cycles of periods of time. From one yuga to the other yuga, there are transitions of consciousness, and it is that big transition of consciousness which is going to occur here in this case here. Therefore, he is initiating the description of time as a part of the cycle of things. See. Now, in the Vedas, there is a very clear distinction, very clear mention of what is called that the year is the body of the Supreme. The body of the Supreme is the year in manifestation. The body or the Supreme.
Yes.
That is ear. What is ear?
What
It is the
ear?
body of the
Here,
Supreme.
Here. 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 One here.
Why ear? Here.
Okay.
Or the Supreme.
and
It is
name, and name. Okay.
So it is the body of the Supreme into which things are going to happen here. You see.
The fourth is
Here, and therefore the complete cycle is described here. See. Now, so ear or the ear as the body of the Supreme, in other words, it is in its physical. Now things had to happen, which is important. Savitri's birth is connected with the things which should happen in the physical.
of course.
That is her yogic work.
Yes.
That is her yogic work actually. Yeah. And therefore the opening section is very, very purposefully, so to say, yogically packed, occultly deep, connected with the things which had to happen in the process of physical transformation because of her coming into time. Into time, you see. The yoga, that is one way of, that is one manner of speaking, so to say, because we are all only people who can think and rationalize, so to say. But that is one way of looking at it. But here, a cycle means the complete movement of the occurrences which do take place in the terrestrial process. Cycle, it is not that go from here and terminate it, it repeats. The repetition is for a further growth. That is important. Therefore, all that thing has to happen in 1 year. It means that it is now going to go to the next step. That is the whole basis of description of the seasons here. Now, apart from that, there is something very interesting also. The description here in Savitri starts with the description of summer. So first is the summer, then comes rain, then comes autumn, then comes winter, then comes frost, and then comes spring. This is the sequence of 6 seasons according to Indian traditions of these 6 seasons. So these 6 seasons are described here in that manner, sequentially. Summer, then rain, then autumn, then winter, then frost, and then spring. The Indian names are Grishma. I don't know if you would like to know. Grishma, that is the summer, then Varsha, rain, then autumn, Sharad, then comes winter, Hemanta, then comes Shishir, frost, and after Shishir comes Vasanta. Vasanta is spring. That is roughly the description of the 6 seasons here. Now these 6 seasons, very roughly speaking, start, we might say in a general way. For instance, summer, you have to allow a little latitude here and there, roughly from April, May. It can be even May, June, or mid-May, June, like that, for 2 months like that, you see. So it starts from roughly April, May, around that time, and the whole cycle comes to a completion in spring, in the description here, we should terminate February, March. If you start with April, then the cycle will be terminated in February, March. Now, it is in March, it is in February that the mother's birthday occurs. So he is indirectly also describing her stepping. It is very biographical in that sense. He is describing, keeping that view, why it starts with summer and ends with spring, because it is around that time that the birth of the mother occurs. In February, almost towards the end, March, that is the springtime, roughly speaking, you see. So the pattern is very clear, is very indicative of all these details. In a way, you see how he has chosen and described these aspects of this music. So it is really the birth of the mother. You might say, you see, if you want to be kind of cultist in that sense. But this is of course a universal poem, and you have to see from that angle also. But the relationship is very clear also. Why he starts with Grishma, that is summer, and ends with Vasanta, that is spring, is directly connected with these things, with these details in that sense. Now, in Indian literature, there is one great poem describing the 6 seasons by Kalidasa. You must have heard of his name, Kalidasa, of course. And his poem is called Rutu Samhara. Rutu Samhara. Rutu means seasons. Samhara means collected together. All the descriptions of Rutus are collected together. And in that sense, we have a kind of a parallel here. There is no parallel of this kind anywhere else except Kalidasa, what we are in Savitri. In English poetry, there are a few small poems describing 4 seasons. They go essentially by 4 seasons, you see. There is nothing like rainy season there, you see. So essentially I got summer, winter, autumn, spring, 4 seasons, you see. But here we have, and there is a small description of some season. For instance, Keats here, he speaks of autumn. Shelley, he speaks at 1 or 2 places of spring. You see, in some places, you see. But a complete description of seasons, apart from what we have in Kalidas, is only present here. Kalidasa's poem is a fairly long poem. It has 144 stanzas describing all the 6 seasons in a sequence. Whereas here we have roughly 100 lines or so in Shivandu Savitri, you see, compared to that. But the major difference between these 2 poems is Kalidasa's is basically a sensuous description of poetry. It is a lover who is describing the various seasons to his beloved. It is essentially a sensuous description on a physical plane, on a vital plane. But here you have got the purity of the spiritual lyricism in the entire description, straightaway. In fact, as we shall see, read this thing, we will see more and more of these aspects in detail. But in fact, I might make one more important point here. If you look at the poetic style which is present from this point onward and what was there earlier, this marks a sudden difference. The earlier parts, all those 12,000 lines, were essentially written by Shivandu in his own hand. Most of the lines were written by him in his own hand. Whereas from this point onward, majority of the descriptions which I got are by dictation. So my feeling is that makes a lot of difference. Writing things yourself and dictating those also get reflected in style. And you can see that the style here is definitely different than what you have in the earlier parts. In fact, we'll see those things as we proceed more and more in that connection. But it is important to know that there is a difference in this style. Here you have, particularly in this book and in the next book also, more of lyrical quality. Lyrical quality is very strong. Pure lyrical poetry is what you see here in these 2 books, book 4 and book 5. Book 5 particularly, you see, Earlier, very dense, solid, very occult, of course, very spiritual all through. But here, it is spiritual lyricism, which is what is coming out most prominently in this part, you see.